Hello fellow YouTubers, my name is Adrian.exe. Welcome to episode 2 of Content Analysis, where I take viewer suggestions on different topics and analyze them. As you might have guessed, I still don't have any suggestions, so this week I'll analyze another topic of my choosing. This week we'll cover It by Stephen King, more specifically the psychological concepts behind Pennywise and what makes the character invoke a sense of fear from audiences as well as characters in the movies. It, Bob Gray, or Pennywise, is a shape-shifting, mind-controlling, ancient cosmic entity that awakes from hibernation every 30 years to bring about chaos and feed on the children of Derry, Maine. But what makes Pennywise scary? Is it simply that he is able to read minds, pick out our deepest fears, and bring them into our reality? Well, according to psychological research, what makes Pennywise scary, especially this fall in the second installment of It, is behavioral unpredictability, as well as a bit of coulrophobia. In a 2001 study, it was shown that the human brain has an affinity for easily discernible, repetitive, and predictable patterns of receiving a reward. This can be seen physiologically in the right superior temporal gyrus using functional magnetic resonance imaging. A 2010 study showed that the human primary visual cortex processes predictable information much more easily, meaning that activity was small in the area when processing predictable information. A 2004 study, experimenters set out to predict whether unpredictable, averse stimuli would elicit a greater response of either phasic or contextual fear. Phasic fear is a fear that dissipates once the fear has been removed. A contextual fear is a sustained state of anxiety after the initial scare. A rationale can be extracted from the safety signal hypothesis, which states that when an organism is able to detect a threat because of a cue, it then perceives its environment as being safe. However, when aversive events are not signaled due to unpredictability, the organism response is chronic anxiety and sustained anticipatory anxiety. Physiological measures included the following: eye blink electromyograph, skin conductance, heart rate, and finger pulse volume. The adverse stimuli consisted of 3 to 5 microamperes, and the air blast was at 60 psi. The shock was administered to the right wrist, and air blast was aimed at the larynx. Researchers found that unpredictable shocks and air blasts sustained anxiety and measured contractions of the orbicularis oculi muscle. They found that the unpredictable stimuli caused greater amount of anxiety. Pennywise preys on the vulnerability of unpredictable aversive stimuli innate in humans. It is also important to note that unpredictability is especially effective at prompting fear in less clearly identifiable stressors, such as in the case of phobias. This is relevant to It Chapter 2, because of how Pennywise incites fear is going to be vastly different to how he did it in the first movie. For example, Beverly as a child was frightened by the gout of blood from the sink because it represented her change into adulthood. As an adult, the decaying body of Mrs. Kirsch is another jab at Beverly's femininity, specifically her fear of aging. In the journal Neural Image in 2011, researchers found that unpredictability is equivalent to fear. Scientists also reported that uncued threats correlated to a greater amount of fear. So how is Pennywise unpredictable? Based on the movies released thus far, Pennywise's unpredictability stems from his ability to reach into the minds of his victims and take the form of their most deeply rooted fears. Anyone who has seen the movies or read the book knows how he attacks each of the losers. He appears to Bill as his dead brother, Georgie, to torment him by reminding him of his ambiguous loss and by making it seem as though it was his fault that Georgie is dead. Ambiguous loss occurs when someone loses someone else psychologically or physically, or both, and receives no closure or understanding as to why it occurred. He appears to Stan as a horrifying disfigured lady in the movie, and as a mummy in the miniseries, which he probably fears due to both figures' disfigurations as well as the fact that they shouldn't exist. He appears to Eddie as a leper, representative of his fear of disease, or nosophobia. It chooses this form most likely because he senses that Eddie may deal with illness anxiety disorder. According to the DSM-5, or Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, a disorder characterized by a preoccupation with fears of having or the idea that one has a serious disease based on the person's misinterpretation of bodily symptoms. Eddie's reliance upon his inhaler for comfort, avoidance of places where he may contract diseases, and the fact that he refuses to accept he is taking a placebo in the miniseries all provide a clear indication that he may have nosophobia and illness anxiety disorder. It appears as Ben's dead father in the miniseries, and as a headless corpse of a kid from the ironworks explosion. in the movie, possibly representing his fear of death in general. He appears to Richie as a werewolf in the miniseries and as Pennywise in the movie. This could just be an indication that Richie may have a fear of werewolves and coulrophobia, respectively. Now, I won't state that everyone has some sort of phobia, because not everyone actively tries to avoid these specific fears, and the level of fear someone may experience may or may not be disproportional to the level of threat it represents. That being said, I'll state which characters I believe may have a certain phobia. It torments Mike with the reminder of how his parents died in the house fire during his early childhood. Pennywise preys on his survivor skill and the loss of his parents, making him feel as if it may have been his own fault that his parents died. It appears to Beverly as her father twice, capitalizing on her fear of sexual abuse or contractophobia from her father. Beverly actively attempts to avoid her father and appears apprehensive when he touches her. Now, I did say it was a he, even though it is speculated that he may be a female. Until that is confirmed, I'll refer to him as a male. Besides unpredictability, it uses the form of Pennywise to prey upon people's fear of clowns. Although depending upon your level of fear of clowns, his appearance may appear welcoming, giving a false sense of security, or he may appear sinister due to his exaggerated or enlarged anatomical features. The color of its makeup and costume has more to do with how we perceive clowns in general, rather than what the colors in themselves represent, which brings us to coulrophobia, recognized by the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, 5th edition, and encompassed under Phobia Code 300.29, is an irrational fear of clowns. Psychologists found that it has less to do with the clowns themselves and more to do with the clowns appearing disturbingly unfamiliar. In Freud's uncanny theory, he states that we can be frightened by something that appears familiar and yet is unfamiliar. The instance of mixed perceptual cues caused by visual realism and textile imperfections cause a sense of discomfort. Additionally, the fear of clowns can be attributed to the ambiguity of threat it presents and limitation of emotions that can be interpreted from a clown's face. Another explanation, named the mortality salient hypothesis, posits that we avoid human-like beings because they remind the individual of their eventual demise. In the violation of expectation hypothesis, the failure of what we are observing to match up with our brain's depiction of what a human should look like causes discomfort and fear. Cognitive appraisal theory is our subjective interpretation of how we perceive a stimuli in the environment. Another reason people generally fear clowns is that the persona of the creepy clown is edged into the American collective unconsciousness as something to be feared. This was partially due to the clown hysteria in 2016, the arrest of John Wayne Gacy in 1978, and how clowns are perceived in the media. If our environment sees clowns as dangerous, that will affect how we view them. This can be seen in Lazar's transactional model of stress. If we view the model, we see that the media, our environment, could influence our perception of what is or isn't dangerous. Besides a clown's general appearance, the killer clown persona was further proliferated with John Wayne Gacy. Gacy was a serial killer active during 1972 through 1978, killing at least 33 people in Cook County, Illinois. 26 of the bodies were found in the crawl space under his home, 3 were found elsewhere on the same property, and the remaining 4 were found within the Des Plaines River. He was convicted of all 33 murders and sentenced to death by lethal injection on March 13, 1980. Gacy's association with clowns solidified him as the killer clown due to his part-time job as Pogo the Clown. There's also the murder of Marlene Warren, which took place May 26, 1990 in Wellington, Florida. Marlene Warren answered her front door to find a clown with flowers and balloons when she opened it. The clown proceeded to shoot her in the face and sped off in a Chrysler LeBaron. She died 2 days later, and Sheila Keene Warren was arrested September 2017. Coincidentally, 1990 was the year it was first released, and 2017 was the year the reboot was released. It seems the public fears of clowns was continuously stoked through the media due to shows like American Horror Story, Freak Show, Batman, the animated series, YouTubers like DM Pranks, music from the Insane Clown Posse, and even video game characters like Sweet Tooth. In 2016, there were numerous clown sightings starting in South Carolina, which led to at least one 16-year-old being stabbed to death. The events that took place associated clowns with fear and danger in modern-day society. It seems as if the evil clown archetype is here to stay. and it capitalizes on society's fear of clowns. It also makes the Losers Club feel helpless through making the adults in the area, including the cops, oblivious to its presence. It can also shapeshift into whatever his victim fears the most, or morph into someone significant to the victim. This can be seen when he morphs into Beverly or Georgie, to lure Ben and Bill closer to insanity, respectively. Regardless of the tactic, one thing is certain: Pennywise was scary when he was just feeding out of necessity. But now, driven by revenge, we are sure to see it more aggressive and fearsome than ever before. Thanks for tuning in to the second episode of Content Analysis. If I don't get any suggestions soon, the next episode is going to cover what we learned about the Chris Benoit tragedy that took place in 2007. If you enjoyed this content and want to see more, feel free to like, favorite, and subscribe for more content.